So I had a friend who a couple of weeks ago asked if I was interested in going with him to a medieval reenactment event. I'd always seen these sort of things on TV, like, Renaissance fairs, and I was kind of curious to see how the real ones compared. Sure enough, there were people there dressed up as peasants, knights, and royalty. There were archery contests, combat, crafts, a medieval-style camp for people who wanted to stay overnight. Overall, it was neat to observe, and I can see why a lot of people were having fun. Personally, I'm not willing to dress in thick armor and fight in the hot sun, so I don't see myself actively going to these events in the future. However, I did go into a deep dive when my friend informed me that the event was organized by a group called the Society for Creative Anachronism, or SCA for short. Apparently, this group had been organizing medieval reenactment events all across the world, and especially in North America, since 1966. In addition, for purposes of both organization and nerdy roleplay, they had a system of kingdoms and fiefs that represented regions and local areas. Each kingdom had its own designated territory, monarch, coat of arms, and so on. And of course, if you decide to become a member, you join one of these kingdoms, create your own persona, and start out as a peasant and hopefully make your way up. The kingdoms are in turn divided into shires, baronies, and other styles of fiefs that represent local groups. So I thought, wait a minute, is there a map of all of this? The answer is yes. Many kingdoms had maps on their websites of their local kingdoms, and there were several maps of what the SCA fittingly calls the known world. However, when an organization has existed for over 50 years and has evolved over time, it wasn't surprising that many of the maps were either contradicting in places or were simply outdated. Some maps were even missing whole kingdoms that had formed in the SCA within the past 10 or so years. So I thought, you know what? I could make a map of that. So I did. But before I get into the map and how I made it, I'm going to talk about this video's sponsor, Ridge. Ridge was already famous for their metal compact devices like their famous wallet and key case, which I still personally use every day. Keeps all of my cards and keys together respectively while taking up much less space. But for the people who are interested in the convenience but still don't like the metal exterior, Ridge is now introducing a leather wallet that keeps their unique design and features, but now with a more familiar and traditional leather exterior. As it so happens, Ridge is currently having an up to 40% off Father's Day sale through June 15th, and I can't think of a better Father's Day gift than one of these new leather wallets. So go to ridge.com/emperor with the link below to get a new wallet or key case today. Absolutely worth it. That's ridge.com/emperor. Thanks again to Ridge for sponsoring this video. So for making this map, I'm not a programmer or knowledgeable in code, so I don't know how QGIS works. I just draw. It's fun even if it takes time. There's a government-made map of North American river watersheds that is a huge size that I've used as a reference for making other maps in the past. In this case though, I'm not making my typical pixel art animated maps in MS Paint style of map. I'm attempting more of a National Geographic style of map with smoother lines, and so I'm going to use the art app Procreate on my iPad. I tilted the map the way I wanted it and traced the coastlines and rivers. The government map also shows state borders, which makes it easier to draw kingdom borders later on. For the shires and baronies within the kingdoms, they're either based on zip codes or counties depending on the kingdom. Heck, sometimes the kingdom websites used both or were ambiguous, and in some cases I had to make an educated guess. Honestly, zip codes make sense when finding your local group to sign up for or get mail from, so I get it, but usually for territorial borders on a map, the county ones made more sense to me personally, so I just tended to go for county borders unless otherwise proven. While the coasts, major rivers, and state borders are traced, the local group borders are not, and done by eye. I'm sure a satellite or QGIS program is more accurate, but like I said, I don't know how to use those and I like to draw. I can use the bends of the rivers, coastlines, and state borders to better accurately pinpoint where the lines start and end. It helps that a lot of it is straight lines anyway, and the ones that aren't are typically usually just the rivers. That being said, many of the kingdoms did have previously made maps, like I mentioned, and even if a lot of them were out of date, they were still useful to double check my borders with, especially for the zip code based ones. So in the description I link to all of the other previously made maps that I double checked mine with in the description. That being said, when some maps made contradictions, sometimes I just had to make a call. Like in National Geographic style, I used a color band for the kingdom's borders and a lighter shade for everything in the middle, although I decided to keep a solid dark color for the crowned lands so that way they could be distinguished from local groups. I also used different border styles to distinguish cantons from shires and provinces, since cantons are like groups within groups. And even though I'm going for a National Geographic style, I did want to kind of keep it with a closer to the medieval era style of map by only using 4 colors for the kingdoms, and I went with 4 colors that were really common during early colonial era maps, like around the Age of Exploration. After several hours scattered across a few days, I finally had 18 of the 20 kingdoms finished. Later, I exported the image out of my iPad and onto Paint.net, where I expanded the map to a 16:9 ratio to make room for some smaller hemisphere map insets for the 2 other kingdoms and the overseas territories. Which honestly, for those, I just traced the outlines from Google Earth screenshots. Otherwise, the shires and baronies within were still approximated by eye and hand, and it's small enough to where it still looked pretty good. Now, for some of the overseas groups, many of them seem to have gone inactive over time, and unlike North America, where they would normally just become crowned lands, for overseas territories, I just kept the borders based on the groups I could still confirm were active. Especially since several of the overseas groups seemed based on US military base presence rather than active participation by the country. Also, for the European Kingdom of Drachenveld, I think that's how it's pronounced, I had some people tell me that they apparently claimed all of Europe, Africa, and the parts of Asia that weren't a part of another kingdom, and that just kind of seemed a bit much, especially when none of the other world maps that I saw would give Drachenveld all of that. So I simply gave them the territories that they mentioned covering on their website. However, in the past, Drachenveld did have territories in South Africa and Afghanistan, but those are gone from what I can find. Maybe I could have left them as crown land since they used to be there, but they aren't mentioned on the website anymore, so I just left them out. But of course, there's still plenty of space in this hemisphere map to add them in case, Drachenveld ever comes back or there's another future kingdom. After the insets, I added some labels, arrows, and a map legend, and with that, we now have a completed map. It took some time, but it was really fun to make. And if any SCA official or Kingdom official wants to use my map on their website, feel free to email me, and I'll be happy to send you the full resolution file. Anywho, I hope you enjoyed the map and seeing the process behind it. I'm Emperor Tigerstar, and I'll see you guys next time.